think all of the ladies that have been on the board know the glass ceiling that was broken, but don't really understand what it was like at that particular moment in time and what that means for the rest of us. So I just figure we'll just have a casual conversation about how amazing you are. Is that okay?
Oh, certainly.
So I want to say, first of all, thank you, Eileen, for accepting my invitation to do this.
It's my honor.
Good. Well, it's my honor to be able to talk to you because I feel like it's just, I think after several years and after we just forget about all of the things that have made the organization so important and made the association what it is. Can you kind of just tell me how you got in the industry?
By accident.
Yeah?
Pretty much like half the people working in the industry. My husband and I moved to Jacksonville, Florida. I was looking for an apartment. And I walked into a leasing office and there was a guy on the phone. He said, sit down, fill out an application. Well, I sat down, got off the phone. He said, you're not filling out an application. I said, well, I'm just here to see an apartment.
Right.
Oh, well, I'm interviewing for a manager. I filled out an application in case I wanted to lease something, and got a call from him that night in the hotel. Said, I've interviewed 34 people, and you're the only one I really had a good relationship with. Would you be interested in the job? I said, well, I don't know anything about it. He said, you told me you grew up for the first 19 years of your life in apartments in New York.
So that's it.
I said, I did. He said, then I can teach you anything you need to know, and I can pay you more than you're going to get as a teacher.
Wow. So you were a teacher at that time?
Just finished my student teaching when I decided I really didn't like kids.
Except your own, right? Yes. Sometimes.
Not especially.
Sometimes it depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So how many years were you in the industry, like, until you retired?
In the industry, actively working, 51.
And then, is that before or after you're kind of I know that you retired, those of you that
Yes,
know.
I did.
You retired, and then you had an amazing offer from someone, and how did that work out? What forced you to get back in?
It worked out exceptionally well. When COVID came, I decided that life was too short to deal with working and COVID. And so I retired
and love it.
Love it. Love every minute of retirement.
Well, you've worked hard, right? And that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Work hard so that you can rest well.
Of course, I have a sign that someone gave me and said, retirement is God's reward for never killing a boss.
That would be a different kind of retirement, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So during that 50 years, what was how do you even narrow down like a greatest accomplishment?
Developing people.
How did I know you were going to say that? Like, I was like, she is going to say that she loves seeing people grow and develop because that's who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're amazing at it. I mean, you've worked with so many people and helped them grow their careers. Why do you think you're so good at that? Why do you think you have a knack for moving people through that process?
Because I genuinely care. It's not, I want you to grow in the company I head so I can look better.
Right.
It's, I want you to grow in the company where we work together so we can all benefit from it. And so that you will have an expanded future that you might not have had if you didn't have a growth opportunity.
And if you hadn't molded and pushed so many people through the process and through the association and through the industry, think of all those people we would have lost.
Yes. Yes.
So you were in Florida for several years.
In Florida for 10 years.
Okay. And how did you end up in Houston?
Job transfer. I was with Johnstown Properties at the time, and they transferred Ed and I both out here.
And loved it? Or
Yeah.
was it,
Yeah, we've been here 43 years now.
Is there anything that you wish that you could have told yourself?
The time passes in a heartbeat. I would have told myself, although I did thoroughly enjoy my year as president, to not forget a minute of it. Because in the blink of an eye, it's over, and you're one of the has-beens.
Right, which you're not, but yes, yeah.
Contribute as much as you can while you're there for the betterment of the association, and in my case, the future of women in the association.
Did you realize then what a difference you were making, and what a step, like how you were kind of setting the standard and setting the bar? Did you realize it?
I realized what a challenge I had before me. Ted Dinerstein, one of the founders of HAA, was sitting beside me in the board meeting when they announced that I would be put on the ladder. And he said, Eileen, it's long overdue that we had a woman on the ladder, and I am so glad it's you. And I floated on that for the entire time that I was in office. I also was very much aware that if I stepped that much out of line in that year, that I was going to be the first and probably the last. So I walked the straight and narrow. We'd go to a meeting, I'd have one drink. I was not going to give anybody anything to talk about to deprive the people who were younger than I and wanting to come up that ladder from getting a spot. Women were few and far between back then. You know, the era that I came from, if I had remained in teaching and gotten pregnant, by the time I was 3 months, I would have to leave my job because you were not allowed to stand in front of a classroom and show that you were pregnant. So times and your perspective of how things are now doesn't really translate to how they were in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Sure.
And progress was being made, but in minute areas. I had a wonderful year, but the women in HAA have always been supportive. We're almost like a sisterhood. And there isn't any of them that I can't pick up the phone and call on any given day and ask a question or ask for a reference and get an honest answer. And that is truly an immeasurable blessing. Something you can't buy.
No, and I think it's something that we take for granted if you've been in this industry your whole life and haven't seen other industries where it is, I don't want to say cutthroat, but it is survival of the fittest in some instances.
And highly competitive. Not that we're not competitive.
Sure.
But in a good way.
So I don't know how the process was when you were selected as president, but did you have any idea? Like, were they kind of mumbling, like, hey, it might be time? Or was it, hey, have you seen how amazing she is? Like, was there any idea that this was time?
I guess I was outspoken. I said I would love to join the board, but only under the condition that at some point I will be considered to run for president.
Wow.
And I lobbied right off the bat, this is what I want. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get there, but that's my end goal.
And how was that received?
Surprisingly well. In fact, I was amazed because at that point, the only women on the board were Nora Krakauer and I.
To think about what that looks like now, right? And intimidating for you to rise up through that. Yeah, I can imagine. And you know, just feeling that amount of pressures for yourself, if I step out of line, but also for, like you said, the gravity of the situation for those that would follow you and having that immense amount of responsibility. Wow. Well, you obviously rose to the occasion, and
I did.
Yes. And I know there's 12. I'm the 13th woman. I don't know if you know that. I was kind of calculating, and I was like, we've got a calendar. I'm the 13th woman that has served, and I know that every single one of them that I have kind of spoken to in passing always says, what if there wasn't Eileen?
But there's always a first, Stephanie.
Yes.
If it wasn't me, it would have been one of the other 12 excellent women that served in that position.
Sure. Was there something that you lobbied for during your year?
I pushed for more education. Education is something that once it's given to you, it can never be taken away. You know, you can lose your job, you can lose your house, you can lose your car. You can't lose your knowledge until you get to be my age.
Well, yeah, it tends to come a little slower, and I'm not your age yet. I'm like, what was that word? Oh, a lease. We need to sign a lease. And then I'm like, what is happening here? Right? It tends to go a little bit slower. Vitamins help that, right? And less alcohol at the board meetings would help that too. Just one, right? What do you see as one of the greatest things that's happened over the years? Like, as you've seen the association develop, Has there been anything that you were like, I'm really glad that happened?
One of the things I really enjoy and still do is the Abode magazine. I read it from cover to cover every month. There are a lot fewer people that I recognize these days
Sure.
than at the time. But it's always informative. It keeps me up to date on what's happening in the industry and the association. It allows me to see the next generations coming up in the industry and their contributions and how involved they are.
Sure.
Political action, you can't put a dollar value on it. Over the years, the laws and regulations that HAA has been instrumental in changing have created millions of dollars for developers and managers of multifamily property. I think it is a very behind-the-scenes organization.
Okay.
You know, we're not in everybody's face, but we subtly get the job done behind the scenes and get it done well.
People don't realize the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes that we can't talk about. You know, we're the largest apartment association in the nation, in the universe, in the galaxy. And you know, to have the largest educational, we have a university. We have a budget of some small, you know, some small technical schools. And it's important that people know that and contribute and that we continue that cycle. So on another note, I have heard some interesting facts about you. But I wanted to know if there was any that you would want to tell me that are an interesting fact about you, not necessarily related to the industry, but if you were asked on a game show what your interesting fact was, what would it be?
You really don't want me to talk about the Gentleman's Club, do you?
Maybe not that one. Maybe a second interesting fact.
I'm married 59 years next month.
How did he feel when you were getting in on the board and then president? How did that go over?
He has always been the most supportive person I know. It's, you know, whatever you want to do, hon, that's fine. I'm there with you, you know.
I mean, there was a responsibility there for him too, right? Like, you know, being the man behind the woman of HAA, right?
Being the first man.
Sure.
Yeah. He came to every function we had that I had to be there. He was there with me.
So do you think that he understood the gravity of the situation as well?
Probably not as much as I did, because he had always seen me doing things that were not necessarily expected of women.
It was just a given that you were gonna be successful and do what you wanted to do and fight the fight, and it wasn't even.
Yes. First real job that I ever had was working for a man named Robert B. Anderson, who was President Eisenhower's Secretary of the Treasury. I went and applied for the job, and they said, well, we have one opening, but we're really looking for somebody with a lot of experience. I said, I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm very bright. And if I don't work out in 30 days, I will be happy to come in and give you my resignation, and you can continue looking in that time.
Awesome.
And I walked out with the job.
Yeah.
And it was an impressive job, because he was still doing a lot of government stuff, and I would fly back and forth to Washington with a briefcase chained to my wrist.
Wow.
And, you know, so Ed was not surprised that I was going to be president of the Houston Apartment Association.
Sure.
It was just, well, yeah, that, you know, she wants it, that's what she's going to do.
Yeah. I heard you brought that up, this politics situation. I heard a story about Nixon and you. And I'm guessing that's not like an urban legend.
Horrible man.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. He walked in one day, and he had a briefcase and a coat, which he threw on my desk. And he said, I'll be in the conference room. You tell Bob I'm here. I said, yes, sir, I will. Picked his coat up and hung it up. You're everything the press says you are.
The press doesn't lie about this.
Yeah. Well, I was working for him 2 weeks when all of a sudden it dawned on me that the plate of dollar bills hanging framed on the wall was his signature.
Oh, but you're like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. What was your favorite job that you had?
The one I have now.
Yeah. Besides mom and right.
Great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have 3 great granddaughters, and they are the love of our lives. They're 2, 6, and 8.
Oh, wow. And they keep you young, right? Just
They do.
running.
They do. I am so happy that I got married young and had children young so that I could see
Sure.
the 3rd generation.
So that brings up another topic. So how many people in your family are in the industry?
Well, Ed and I, our daughter Trish and our son Robert, my favorite ex-daughter-in-law Jackie, her son Blake, Trish's daughter Morgan, and Erin, and the next generation isn't old enough.
So not only were you the first female president, but you were also the first HAA Hall of Fame recipient. How does that compare in, I guess, notoriety to the presidency?
The presidency was something that I worked for and shed blood, sweat, and tears to get.
Mm-hmm.
The Hall of Fame was something that I was awarded for all of the blood, sweat, and tears that I shed.
Mm-hmm.
It was purely an honor,
Mm-hmm.
and something I will always be very proud of and grateful for.
So we've come a long way in Apartment Association. You've been involved in all of those years. You've been actively involved. What are some changes that you think need to happen?
I mean, originally this was an owners association.
Yep.
There are very few owners,
Right.
company owners. And I'm certainly not minimizing the contributions of people who run management companies, who work for management companies, but I think we're missing a perspective of ownership.
You heard it here first. Eileen wants you to help out in recruiting. We have a new recruitment drive. It's coming your way. Not for me, from the young lady. So is there anything else that you want to talk about that was a burning question or that you want to offer your wisdom about?
I think some of the programs that have started over the last 10 years, the 40 under 40 and the Gen Xers, and I think those are exciting, well-founded programs that are going to grow the younger people in the industry into the Stephanies and the Eileens. They're committed, they'll stay around for a long time to come, because I think they have learned early how much to enjoy the association.
Well, so on that note, is there any advice you would give ladies or gentlemen kind of moving up in the industry and what they can do to advance in the association, or any advice you'd like to give someone in the industry?
I think you need to make the decision makers aware that you are interested in growth and that you are available to work hard, as opposed to just showing up.
Yeah. Well, I love your real life example of going into that interview and saying, okay, well, give me 30 days, and if you don't like me, then we'll call it a day. Like, how much more of I want this opportunity and prove myself can I do, instead of sitting in the shadows and being like, call me if you want to call me. I think you're a really great example of, going after what you want and doing the work necessary to get there. So, so I would like to personally thank you for sitting down with me. I know I've spoken with you a couple times and see you all the time, and just think of what and hear stories about, at Monica Gracia. I spent the weekend with Monica Gracia, and I hadn't told anybody that I was doing this, and I was like, so I have a secret to tell you. I said, I'm interviewing Eileen on Monday, and she was like, oh my gosh, right? And she told me that you were a roller derby girl, which is a fact, and so kind of shared a couple stories and just said, I learned more from her in the year that I worked for her than I've ever learned from anybody in the association or in the industry.
That's very kind of her.
So it just an amazing legacy and footprint that you have left on the association, not only for women but for all of us, and just your level of activism and involvement has transcended through the years, which many membership hasn't. And so I want to personally thank you, and thank you as a member of the Apartment Association.
It was my pleasure.
Good, and the fact
I
that you
enjoyed
love it.
every minute of it,
Mhm.
and still do.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not as involved, but anytime I get the opportunity or am asked, I'm more than happy to participate.
Wonderful. And this isn't a goodbye by any means. I'm hoping that we continue. This isn't the last one, this last interview that we're going to have, but I certainly appreciate, and your frankness, you're always very upfront about, and I certainly appreciate that. You're able to tell people with a smile, no, we're not going to do that today. Do you want some coffee? So I appreciate it, and hopefully you'll see some changes this year, and I appreciate your feedback and going on with the association for years to come.